Welcome, everybody. I am your host, Jason Tondro, for an episode of the Banff Podcast. And with me is Jim Seals.
Hello.
Author of the newest Goatlands adventure, Mutiny at Blooming Port. The Goatlands is Feigning Goat Games' 5e setting. It's got 3 adventures already out. And with this 4th, we'll be doing a compilation. We'll be doing a compilation of all 4 as a collected, sort of like a adventure path, although it's more focused on the lower levels than the higher ones. And the Goatlands are a setting which every author has sort of responsible for a different part of the territory, and we all kind of came up with our own nations, and we pushed them all together and came up with a lot of crossover plots and adventures and stuff. And Jim dealt with the Great River. The Great River Ea. Is that right? Or Ea or Ea?
I think it's Ea.
Ea.
It's however the old English pronounced river, so it's like ATM machine.
Okay,
so it's literally Great River.
And you started with a group of people that live on the river.
Yes.
Aesons?
Yeah, the Aesons.
Tell us about them.
Well, so it's been a couple years. Like I remember you calling me and being like, "Hey, I got this project.
Yeah.
I want you to write for it. Come up with a land." And I sat there for like 5 minutes and said, "I'm not going to come up with a land. I'm going to come up with a river."
Because you are contrary to your bones.
I am. I'm like, all right, you guys have to play Jedi, and then I come up to you with like a Wookiee hero.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my shit, right? Like,
players can identify with that. I think we could all.
Yeah. So I came up with this river, and at the time I was reading this book. I think it was called Confessions or something to that effect. The gimmick was it was 2 star-crossed levels, and they were being reincarnated throughout Chinese history.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And one of the stories, and I didn't quite like the book. There was a lot of sexual violence in the book.
Okay.
But one of the stories dealt with the Tonka. And the Tonka are a folk in China that live only on boats.
Right.
So it's like, what is the D&D equivalent of Tonka?
Yeah.
And from there, I started coming up with ideas as to how these people would live and function and just migrate up and down the river. Well, that's well and good in a world-building sense.
Yep.
And would be perfect for a book.
Right.
Not so good for adventure writing.
Why not?
Well, there's so most D&D adventures, at least from my perspective, the D&D games I played in are very land-based.
Right.
Like the sea is your subway to get you from one kingdom to the next, right? And maybe you fight a couple monsters, but you're not living on the sea.
Yeah, the exception is like the campaign, the whole campaign that's based around the sea, right?
Yeah. And I was coming up with this whole river system that was supposed to be like the Mississippi times 3,000.
Yep.
With tributaries and different colonies of folk living on it.
Yeah.
Well, you have to introduce all that to a land-based group, so they have to come to the river in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And then they have to interact with the people long enough to do something, right? There has to be a story there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was like the biggest problem with this project went through several drafts.
Right.
And the original draft was this sprawling sandbox adventure where like whole players wouldn't see hundreds of pages. Like it was ridiculous. It was the folly of the first time D&D writer, right?
Well,
everything in the kitchen sink.
Yeah, you would not be the first author that overwrites their draft. Like that's But part of that was because you did a lot more than just create the river, right? Like you had this whole community, this whole area where the players could hex crawl through it and find all of these different stories going on. And it wasn't just, oh, there's a murder mystery going on or the ASNs need your help. It was like all of this other stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of content there. There was a lot of meat on the bone. The problem is there was a lot of fat on the bone. Okay. And I think last year you came down for the holidays.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I don't know what to do. I have a draft that's 150 pages, two documents. And you just said, begin again. And I
Yeah.
remember looking at you across the table and saying, "Fuck you." Like with the utmost sincerity, and you know how much affection I have for you. But like, but then we started playing this Avengers game, and of course my brain starts thinking, all right, 20 minutes I had a storm. Like 20 minutes I had an idea of, okay, if you need six encounters to introduce things, I'll introduce the AS, like this tribe of ASNs called the Tovali, introduce them, and they want to settle away from the river.
Right.
Because the river is slowly dying due to like magical pollution.
Yeah, you've got like this environmentalism plot.
Yeah, so I figured, okay, that gives me enough to introduce it. If other, game masters want to explore the holes of, wizardry pollution, that plot hook's there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it gave me enough to give you a 1 night or 2 night adventure.
Yeah, what I did then, and you mentioned like the sort of 6 encounters. So I've been at Paizo for 1.5 years now, and as an editor at Paizo, I read a lot of adventures.
Oh, I bet.
And we do 4 organized play adventures every month, 2 for Pathfinder and 2 for Starfinder, and then we do 2 adventure path chapters, 1 for each of those 2 games. So that's 6 adventures every month, and my eyes get onto at least half of them. Anyway, but the point was that we have this kind of structured outline for our organized play sessions, and they're designed to be 1 night sessions to approximately 4-hour time limit, and there's a certain sort of expectation of what that night is gonna look like when a player sits down to play in it. They don't know the GM, they don't know any of the other players, they don't know who anybody's character is, but they know that they'll probably have about 4 or 5 encounters. Okay. And one of them will be a skill challenge, and then maybe there's another optional encounter. And that sounds really railroaded, but it's not. It's just an expectation of how much stuff you can reasonably do in 1 night. And so I gave you that outline. I said, just do it like an organized play. And you've got a certain ratio of a number of encounters. And of course, you went way over that, because I was like, okay, you did. I said, so maybe there's 1 optional encounter. Well, you decided that 1 optional encounter is actually 3 optional encounters that the players could go to, 1 or all of them, right? And I
did.
Totally did. And then you did and so every encounter kind of exploded, and the skill challenge is like 5 pages, and then we had like the whole drinking contest mini game that we came up with and all this stuff. But
can I say, as designing goes,
the
drinking game mini contest is the thing I'm most proud of.
Good.
The idea of being a certain level of inebriation gives you inspiration points, and going 1 over that level gives you penalties.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone else has come up with it. I'm sure it's been homebrewed to death, if you forgive the pun. But when I wrote that was a Command S save moment. That was you know what? My day today, I think I am done. I am going to start again tomorrow. I can't top that peak.
Well, I'm a fan of conflict in the game that is resolved in a non-violent fashion. And so when we were talking about what was going to go into this adventure, and you were like, okay, there's pirates and there's undead and there's all this other stuff going on, and I'm like, great, that all sounds cool. But we didn't really want to fight the pirates because you kind of like the pirates.
Yeah.
And players like pirates. Like, the players want to hang out with the pirates. So instead we thought, okay, well, how can we create an interesting encounter that's not beating up on pirates? And we hatched on this idea of the drinking contest minigame, which I dig. I think it's great. And we were inspired a little bit by Paizo is not shy about inventing these kinds of mini games inside of an adventure to create some kind of suspense or tension. So, for example, maybe you have to persuade all of these guild leaders, and they've all got persuasion points, and you have to wear their persuasion points down with skill checks. Everything gets measured with this kind of point-based system, which is unique to the adventure. And that's kind of what we did, where, you know, like the more you drink, you get these inebriation points, I think.
Yeah.
Drug points or whatever we call them. And the more of them that you have, as you noted, you go on this table and there's a sweet spot where you're just drunk enough to be awesome. and then it goes bad fast. Yeah. But you got a bunch of other stuff going on in there. There's a whole murder mystery subplot. There's a romance subplot. There's the betrayal by my ex-lover subplot. And that's
I love subplots. I grew up reading Chris Claremont X-Men comics.
That's right.
And I'm not talking to John Bourne. Like I'm too young for that era. I'm talking the Chris Claremont X-Men are in Australia, and everything is a subplot.
Who was the artist on that?
Jim Lee for a little bit.
Oh, really?
Will Spatacchio was also an artist. Okay. That's how I met him. But yeah, I'm in that, like, right before the 90s boom hits.
There is not a single NPC in this adventure who does not have a name and a backstory.
Yeah.
Like, there is not a generic pirate. No, nowhere in this. Like, every single character that you meet has a name and a backstory, and that is the Jim Seals stamp right there.
Yeah. And they have wants and desires, and those wants can be simple. It can be just like, I want the gold.
Right.
But you understand, you understand the frustration of being in a situation where you signed up to a job just for the money, and now the money's not coming in.
Yeah. Right.
And now you're like, well, I'm going to betray everyone because fuck them. I'm not getting what I wanted, what I signed up for.
All right. Now, it's set at this place called the Blooming Port. So
yes.
tell us the story of the Blooming Port.
All right. So in the Goatlands, there was an event called the Reign of Terror, where everyone transforms into lycanthropes like 100 years ago.
Yeah, there was
the Beast Plague. The Beast Plague.
Yeah, there was the Beast Plagues. And they were
conflated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Beast Plague happens, and the whole idea is that you're in this section of the Goatlands of the Panaline Kingdom that was on the move upward, but then the Beast Plague happens, and then it suddenly takes a steep nosedive. Right. The people who protect the place all turned into giant monsters, and they're locked up within a tower. And they're all like warlocks, so, you know, don't mess with them. And one of the ideas was that the Blooming Port was this place that this knight, Sir Kaito, the duck knight, found.
We'll get to him in a minute. Go on.
Yeah, he finds this town and then invites his queen up there in her honor, and she gets there. And what he doesn't understand is that he founded it in a certain season, and when it becomes spring, all the water fills into this floodlands.
Right.
So
it's flooded.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of ducks and him and these houses that are sinking into the ground, and the queen gets there and she's in like knee-deep mud.
Right.
And so she's not happy, and they have like this chaste romance, and he doesn't let it get him down, and instead he like redoubles his effort. So he builds this town on stilts of stone, and then people during the when it's flooded, during those months, people use gondolas.
Right, right. Okay.
To transport themselves from point A to point B. And the reason it's called the Blooming Port is after the floodwaters recede in summer,
yep.
Wildflowers bloom everywhere.
Right, okay.
And that was sort of my idea of taking something that sounded a little fun, a little silly, and also like a course, like Blooming Port. like a profane thing, like, and making it this kind of like sweet sort of saccharine love story, because that's just how I roll.
And so then we've got the Duck Knight, and you mentioned him already once, and you created this whole suite of magic items, basically like a set, like a magic item set. Anybody who's played any kind of online gaming knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
you get a set of magic items, and if you have them all, they sort of work well together. And you scattered these magic items all around the adventure, not only in the Blooming Port, but also before you even get there.
Yeah. I love treasure hunts in video games. I like like one of the equipment manuals for full E had this badass barbarian lion cloak thing going on.
Okay.
Well, you get the headpiece, and then you have the sword, and you have the boots. And I always wanted to find all these. Like as a player, like I read this, I was like, I want this for every one of my games. But you know, the cost of being a developer and being someone who has access to all these books is you wind up DMing more than you wind up playing.
Right.
So I've never gotten to break out these toys and play with them. But I thought, you know, what if I came up with that for this game and came up with something that was a little tongue-in-cheek, a little silly. And I think like one of the items uses the quack as a magic wand.
Well, it's not just any item, right? It's a musket.
Yeah, it's the big item.
Yeah. So the quack, is it called the Quacken Bonner?
Yeah, the Quacken Donner.
Quacken Donner.
Which is like German for something, and it says the translation in parentheses right next to it.
But there's like a musket, and then I think there's a breastplate and a helmet, which of course is shaped like a duck's head, and what else? Oh, a sword cane.
Yes, the sword cane.
And a monocle, some kind of eye thing.
The monocle is something else.
Oh, that's right, it is.
The dragon lady wants.
That's right.
It's a dragon. It's Dungeons and Dragons, people. I put a dragon somewhere.
Well, this is for like level 3 characters, so not the sort of dragon you would expect in a level 3 adventure.
Yeah, it was my. I hate mono hobos. I don't have any interest in playing that game.
Yeah.
I know people love that style of play. But for me, like once you're just killing everyone indiscriminately, it's not fun. And I wanted a giant middle finger in the middle of this adventure. So if you decided to model a particular NPC who should by no means be modeled,
right,
there was a repercussion that was immediate.
Yeah. Okay. there were consequences for these actions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good old school D&D right there, where. Every encounter in the adventure is not tuned to the player's level.
Yeah,
there are back in the 3E days. I remember the second adventure that came out with Forge of Fury, which got reprinted in Tales from the Yawning Portal. But anyway, I think it's a level 3 to 5 adventure, and at one point there's a roper in it. And if you remember D&D 3rd edition, ropers are like level 9 monsters or something, and they don't just fuck up your entire party. Like there's no way that you could possibly beat this thing. But it's and there was a note in the encounter saying this encounter is too powerful for your players, and if they try to fight it, they'll all die. Sometimes players need to learn the hard way not to fight every monster, right? So,
well, and again, I always approach encounter writing. I try to approach it like fighting is the last option.
Okay, yeah,
and maybe that comes from playing Ars Magica a lot, and you just don't want to fight because it's exhausting.
Well, you're a Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
You know.
That is. Conflict
is the last resort. The first man to draw a gun is the one who's run out of ideas, right? Yeah.
That's why it's Wolf, right?
Yeah.
For at least 2 or 3 seasons. So I always try to be like, all right, you can encounter this person. She wants something like everyone else. She has a goal.
Yep.
And it happens to be this molecule. And then you have the subplot of, well, do I want to go trade for the molecule, or do I want to go break in somewhere and steal it?
Yeah. And then you've got a very sort of cinematic approach to gaming, I think, to writing in general, I think. But so that this adventure ends with a kind of special effects extravaganza, right? Where like the pirate ship bombards the countryside, and we've got this whole sort of system where the players can decide, are they attacking, are they retreating, are they taking cover, and then all these different effects based on what they do and where they are. There's a lot of not randomized effects in this adventure, and also different consequences based on how you play it, so that when different groups play through this adventure, it will be a different story for each group. Like it's not everyone doesn't encounter everything in this adventure. If you want to have all of the encounters, you actually have to play the adventure more than once.
Yeah.
Which I think is really neat. I love I love adventures in which they have either replayability or there are multiple paths through the story, so that when the players get together at the gaming store the next week and they compare what happened to them at the Blooming Port, their stories are totally different, right? Like one guy could have a story about something that the other player doesn't even know existed in the dungeon at all, in the adventure at all.
Yeah.
And then and then there's a whole section before we even get to the Blooming Port. Like you've got, because you came up with this idea where the Aesons have a sort of adoption policy, which is a way for characters that are not human to join this culture.
Well, even if you are human, you can join it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone who, like, if you hang out with the Tovari and you're like, I like these people, I want to be adopted by them. There's a system in the back where you can actually role play that, and you can figure out what you need to do.
And I think you have a background for them too, right? So players can start with the background of the Aeson. Yeah,
those a background. There's also a new race. Well, quasi new race. I put it in the back. The Urban Elves.
Yeah, it's a subtype, right? Like a subtype. Yeah.
And the Urban Elves are sort of the minority expression of what elves would be.
Right.
So
they're living in a city surrounded by humans, and I love that bit where they get called. You're telling the player what it's like to be an urban elf, and everyone just calls you the elf all the time.
Yes, and it's all disrespectful.
Yeah.
So it's playing with these ideas of I don't want to say introducing reality into a game where those dragons and magic wands that do damage.
Yeah.
But sort of trying to say, okay, like not everyone's going to get along 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing some of these cultural issues into a game. It creates great tension, and for those players that like something kind of darker and grittier, it gives them something to latch onto.
Yeah.
A lot of players, they don't want to be the heroic hero type. They don't want to be the Duck Knight. They want to be like the dark and gritty goth guy.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever, they want to be metal, or they want to be something that's maybe a little bit harder around the edges. And playing a character who has been kind of discriminated against for most of their life is a great way to do that.
And I've been watching, recently I've been watching the show Hell on Wheels, and it's about the creation of the railroad, the Trans-America Railroad.
Yeah.
And a lot of the characters are black. And it's right after the Civil War.
Yep.
And so it's, where do black people fall under the social constructs of, I'm still a labor force, but I'm making money for my wages.
Yep.
But I'm also getting no respect.
Right.
And that was sort of the way I approached the Urban Elf, is an exploitable labor force that's cut off from the trees. They're cut off from nature. They're living within these cities. So the proper elves look down on them.
Yep.
And then the humans just use them as exploitation.
Yeah.
And sort of like how you fit within those worlds, having that background.
It came out to, I remember it came out to about 16,000 words, but how many pages did that come out to?
The final product, I think, is with 2 columns, I think was 29, 30 pages.
Yeah, about 30 pages?
Yeah, 26.
That includes not just the adventure, but also all the background material on the Aesons and the
Great River.
The Great River and all that, the urban elves and the magic item sets, and there's a bunch of stuff going on in here other than just the adventure.
Also, we haven't even talked about my favorite part of the adventure.
Which is
the mud skippers.
So you came up with this original monster based on mud skippers. So tell us about them.
Well, originally, all right, this is where copyright is the mother of all invention.
Yes, good.
So I wanted to use bullywogs. There's an opening encounter, it's simple setup.
Yeah.
Players walk over a hill, look down, and see these people being attacked by bullywogs.
Right.
And that was my go point.
Except
bullywogs are copyrighted Wizards of the Coast.
their product identity, yeah.
Yes. So I'm like, all right, I guess I can make them frogmen. That doesn't interest me at all.
Right.
Because then I'm thinking, Battletoads. I'm thinking like rejected Ninja Turtles. And I'm like, that doesn't interest me. And Mudskippers creep the hell out of me. Mudskippers, if you don't know, are amphibian fish.
Yep.
They crawl in mud, as per their name. They leap. They swim. And I was like, you know what? If you take that and you make it humanoid size, they would be fucking creepy.
Yeah, they're kind of creepy looking because they look like something that belongs in the water, but you see them on land. So they don't have the characteristics you expect a land animal to have. You're like, this just looks strange.
Yeah, so I just started researching and just like reading like every bio book that my college happens to have on animal diversity.
Yep.
And I came across a passage where it says they create a water tongue. So they can somehow create a tongue made out of water, and they use it like a frog uses its tongue.
Okay, that's what these guys can do. The Mudskippers can do.
Yes, so I'm like, oh my god, I can have a range attack weapon that drowns the player and keeps him held. Yes. And then the artwork came for it, and I was so inspired. I wrote that little short story that's in the back.
So Aid Smith, who's been doing art for a lot of Fainting Goat Games products, and also did our map for this, by the way, which
is gorgeous.
We're really happy with the map. The Blooming Port is kind of a sandbox location. The players travel all around it on gondolas. They arrive at the garden where they meet the pirates, and there's the whole sort of drinking game thing. But then there's all these other plots sort of all seeded around the location with different little encounters, and the players travel around on their gondolas. And so a good map was really key, and Aid was wonderful in helping us come up with a great map for this. So anyway, Aid drew your illustration of they're not called Mudskippers in the adventure. They're called
Topahas.
Yeah.
Which is Japanese for Mudskipper, because I'm really original.
Oh, all right. So the Topahas, he drew the Topahas, and the Topahas is like drowning and choking this dwarf. This poor hapless dwarf warrior.
Yeah.
Who became the star of your short story.
Yeah, I just saw it, and like the story just immediately came to mind. Like it wasn't even, those times as a writer where you struggle and you like really, like it's one of those days where you spend 24 hours and you get 700 words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then those days where you write 2,000 words and it was 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Thankfully, this was the latter. Like I just sat down and I just wrote it. And I'm like, that was pretty good. Like, I'll send it to Aid as a thank you for sending me this wonderful piece of artwork.
Right. That
took all of my ideas and actually realized it. Yeah. So I was excited and jazzed, and then I sent it off. And then Mike Lafferty was the one who said, we'll just put it in the back.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fantastic.
That's great.
Like, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, well, it's great because we already had the whole adventure figured out. So it's not like anybody's... it's just an extra. It's like a bonus. Add onto the adventure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. Like, there's nothing quite so cool as seeing an artist draw something that you have.
Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you how much I love the map. Like, I have many strengths as a human being. I can talk Star Trek until the cows come home.
Right.
I can write decently. Drawing is not one of them. And map making is awful for me. Like, trying to figure out how things relate in spatial relations, because I don't think in terms of spatial relations. Yeah. I'm like, it's just till the next cutscene.
Right.
That's how far away it is. It's how far I need it to be for the narrative plot.
Well, so this is where I came in, because I your map, and I basically drew a new map based on yours, and so I was able to I sort of function as kind of developer on this. So I just sort of kind of helped iron out some of the rough spots, and we worked together on some of the things like figuring out what CRs were going to be for everything, and I sort of did the editing and stuff. But but yeah, so the map turned out very well. The whole adventure is a lot of fun. It's for 3rd level characters. It in theory is a 1-session adventure, but there's so much shit going on, especially if your players are role players and they want to talk to everybody, because every character in this adventure has a story, that it could very easily bleed over into a 2nd session.
Yeah, there was a whole random table of encounters.
Yeah.
Where half of them are combat encounters and the other half are, you meet this strange person along the side of the road.
Yeah,
they want to tell you this story.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on in this adventure. So, we'll have a link to it in the YouTube notes. So please check it out. And
before we sign off, yeah. I need to give a shout out to Graham Scott.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He's the one who shepherded the project in its giant 2-document states. Yep. For a good yield, because this was originally planned to be Goatlands 2, right. And it's Goatlands 4,
yeah,
because of developmental hell. And Prince Among Men he is, and a lot of the work on the 2nd encounter with the bridge, like those difficulty levels, he helped take my initial ideas and like really develop them and put life into them.
There's this whole like environmental skill challenge thing where the players have to cross the river. And there's different ways they can do it. They can sort of try to go from sandbar to sandbar. They can try to go over the bridge. But the bridge has got a giant hole in it, so they can, if they have to jump across, or if they, like, how do they get all that going on? And there's multiple paths to crossing that obstacle, and there's different ways that different skills can apply. Gray's really great because he's been a DM since forever, and he's written his own work, and he's an amazing creator on his own merits. But he knows how to help create opportunities for players to use abilities that they don't always get a chance to roll. And if you have a player who's got, that survival skill that they never get to check, or, that athletics or whatever skill that they never get to roll, there's a lot of opportunities in this adventure for players to get that moment to shine. And that can really, those are small things for the DM, but they're huge for the player. Yeah. Like, it makes or breaks a night when the player gets to do something and have that one cool moment. So, yeah, Gray was a huge help this whole process. Well, anyway, so check it out. It's Goatlands 4 on DriveThruRPG, and Mutiny at Blooming Port, and we will. I don't know. We don't know what the future of the Goatlands is. If you like the adventure, check out the other adventures in the series. And if you like what you see, then give us a review. Go on to DriveThruRPG and fill out a little review for us. It helps other people find the adventure, and it helps tell us what you liked and what you didn't like, so that we can look at doing more of them in the future. And thanks for listening. Jim, thanks for coming.
Yep, my pleasure.
And we'll see all the rest of you next time on Banff.